Hey, so y'all know sovereignty is my jam, but what is sovereignty? So, what I mean by sovereignty is the ability to be self responsible in connection with Source. We could also call this spiritual adulthood. So, when we find ourselves expecting someone else to be responsible for us, we can pretty much bet we've lost connection with Source. When we're connected with Source, there's no question about who's responsible for our creation because we are creating it. We are co creating it with God, Source, Creator. I use all of those terms interchangeably: God, Source, Creator. I hold that sovereignty is the foundation for true union. If we attempt union without first cultivating sovereignty, what we get is like a mushy merging and a codependent entanglement, right? And cultivating sovereignty really creates the possibility of true union. This has really come forward for me and in the work that I do in the interpersonal realms, and it applies all the way down the line. So we can just kind of expand the concept and zoom it out, and it applies to this larger picture of outer sovereignty. I've really spent the last decade plus of my practice exploring and cultivating inner sovereignty, which has really laid the groundwork for the page to turn to a chapter about outer sovereignty, which has really just come forward for me in the last couple of years. And I've learned a lot of things. I want to share some of them with you. These slides that I'm sharing with you are from the Outer Sovereignty Starter Kit, which is a free PDF that I'm offering that has a lot of information in it. Jurisdiction is just one of the pieces included in this educational offering, and you can access the PDF at a link in the description below. I'll make sure that's there. So, as we move into more and more sovereignty, we're going to find that we move from the public domain into the private domain. In the public domain, there's a lot of expectation about being taken care of or having certain structures in place. There can also be a lot of projection. In the private, we are living men and women of the soil of the earth. We are connected to Creator, and we have been made in the image and likeness of Creator. Therefore, we are creators. And so we, the living men and women, co-create with Creator and develop our lives that we have dominion over, right? So in the private, it's just me and God and my creation and having dominion over my creation. The public is a lot more complex and complicated than that. And we're going to get into that as we get into jurisdiction. So there are three main jurisdictions in law, and they exist in a hierarchy. So I'm going to start with the highest level jurisdiction in the hierarchy, which is the jurisdiction of air. This is also known as ecclesiastical law or God's law. This is a lawful jurisdiction, and it is governed by faith. So I just learned in the last couple of years that the Bible is, first of all, a book of law, and second of all, it's a contract, which is also known as a covenant or a testament or a trust, right? So these elements, these concepts and constructs originate in the jurisdiction of air, in the jurisdiction of ecclesiastical law. So just a quick note on the Bible. It's my opinion that it is best to approach the Bible with a level of discernment, just like everything else. My impression is that some of the original in-streamings of information were distorted, and there's a lot of allegory and a lot of mistranslation from the original Aramaic. So it's wise to sift through for the truth that is available, and I believe there's a lot of it. But essentially, this document, which has come to be known as the Bible, is a covenant between God and the people. And the people are the beneficiaries of the trust of the covenant of the Bible. The quote, the meek shall inherit the earth. Meek was probably mistranslated from humble, right? So the humble people of the living soil are the beneficiaries of the trust that the Bible creates. Fortunately, sometime in the 80s, a statute was passed declaring the Bible a book of law, right? So we really can lean into the wisdom that is present in the Bible as we traverse this territory of jurisdiction. Remember, the jurisdiction of air is the highest level of jurisdiction in the hierarchy. So within this jurisdiction, exchange happens in the form of gifts. Right? It's governed by faith, and exchange happens in the form of gifts. So I see this as like the PowerPoint for moving into sovereignty. So as I explained at the beginning, sovereignty is self-responsibility in connection with God, source, creator. So this is a really powerful point here in the jurisdiction conversation. We each need to be anchored to our own individual connection with source, right? There is no external authority that can bestow upon us this direct connection. When we claim our inborn capacity to be in direct connection with source as a co-creator, that lays the foundation for sovereignty and being able to fully inhabit this jurisdiction and the next jurisdiction that we're going to talk about, which is the jurisdiction of land, right? So God grants man life in the creation in God's image and likeness, which means that we each individual living men and women are also creators with dominion over our creation, right? So God has dominion over the creation. God grants men and women life and creatorship, and then living men and women co-create our lives, and then we have dominion over what we create here on the land, right? So from my perspective, the jurisdiction of land is our proper jurisdiction. It is a lawful jurisdiction. It is governed by equity. It's governed by equity. So here we're looking at natural law, common law, the law of the land, and sometimes it's called the law of man. So natural law is a derivation of God's law from the air jurisdiction. And then man derives common law from natural law. There are two laws in the common law, and they are do no harm and do not trespass. That's it. It's very simple. And as I said, common law is derived from natural law, which is derived from God's law. So we can kind of see the progression there. So here we are, living men and women of the living soil of the earth, on the land, in the private. And so the systems and structures that emerge in this jurisdiction include private membership associations, which are also called PMAs, express trusts. Remember, trusts originate in the ecclesiastical jurisdiction, and as we express them, they shift into the jurisdiction of land, of common law. So express trusts exist in the common law. In the common law, or in the jurisdiction of the land, we are living men and women. Living men and women. I know I've said that a bunch of times. It's really important. We are living men and women living on the land. In this jurisdiction, we go by our given name plus our family name, right? So that would be, for me, it would be Natalie Rose of the House of Martin. That would be capital N, lowercase, the rest of my name, capital R, lowercase, the rest of the name, capital M, lowercase, the rest of the name. And that's called capitis medius, and that's distinguishing me as a living woman. I am a living woman, Natalie Rose of the House of Martin. And you can add that the house of or not. The lowercase letters is the really important part here, right? So given name plus family name. And on the land, we are people. We are living men and women. We are known as people. We the people, the one of the people. We are a people, okay? This is really important. In the jurisdiction of land, we exchange goods and services. We exchange goods and services. And there can be a medium of exchange, a currency involved, but it's an exchange. If you were to find yourself interacting with the court system from this jurisdiction, the case would be governed by equity. In the jurisdiction of land, there are two laws. There are do no harm and do not trespass. And if harm is done, remedy must be made. So this looks like if you damage your neighbor's property, then you fix your neighbor's property. There's no punishment in common law. There's no punitive damages. There's just make it right. So again, we can take the wisdom that we've developed in interpersonal relationships and just zoom it out to social and cultural relationships, right? So we know if we hurt the feelings of someone we love, we need to make a repair, right? We need to make an emotional repair. We need to make it right, right? So if we cause damage or harm to someone in our social cultural sphere, we need to make a repair. We need to make remedy, sort of like dissolving karma before it crystallizes, right? So we keep things moving and balanced and clear. So being governed by equity highlights that process of making remedy. And if, when we're so lucky to be holding our own common law grand juries and common law courts, equity is how disputes would be resolved. So I see that for living men and women living on the land, in connection with God, living our creatorship, having dominion over our creation is the proper jurisdiction for we the people. This is where we belong. Now, somewhere along the way, as we became a global society, it became necessary to develop merchant law. So this came about because ships were sailing seas and doing commerce in a global way, and it wasn't just as simple as exchanging goods and services on the land. So a whole nother jurisdiction developed, the jurisdiction of water, which is also known as the jurisdiction of commerce, commercial law, maritime law, and admiralty law. Right? So we can see that this developed out of necessity, and there was a whole class of merchants who sort of developed this system of the lowest level of the hierarchy of jurisdictions. So this is a legal jurisdiction. So the flavor changes here quite a bit. This jurisdiction is governed by statutes and codes, and it is quite complex. If you go from there are two laws, do no harm and do not trespass, to the massive book of statutes and codes that just the corporate US government alone has going, it's like mind-boggling. There's a lot, right? So it's very complicated, it's very complex, there's lots of nuance, there's lots of rabbit holes and hidden loopholes to explore if you're into that sort of thing. So this jurisdiction developed the money system and the banking system. Before the jurisdiction of water really developed, exchange happened in a much different way. And because they were sending large quantities of goods hither and thither across the oceans, they started developing systems of tracking and credit and debt that evolved into the current money and banking system that we have today, which is also very complex. So this was all fine and good until someone, I'm not sure whose idea that was, or that was a very good idea, someone decided to set all of the living men and women born on the land to sail on the seas of commerce by creating the straw man. So the straw man is a legal fiction created in the jurisdiction of commercial law from a living man or woman, right? And you will recognize this by the all caps name. So this was initiated by the birth certificate, which is a contract that your mother accepted via tacit acquiescence. She didn't know what she was doing. It was offered. She accepted in her ignorance. And thus was created your straw man, the all caps name version of you. And then you can see that repeated on the Social Security card. And so that's attached to the Social Security account. And you can see that repeated on the driver's license and everywhere else that the legal fiction based on your name is interacting with commercial law. So you'll see it on your utility bills and your credit card applications and credit report, and this is also related to citizenship. So a legal fiction was created as a corporation, a dead entity, and here we're called persons. Here we are called persons. And essentially, this person, this corporation, the dead entity represented by your name, is engaged in commerce with the US corporate government on a number of levels. And most people don't know this, right? Most people don't know this. Now, some people find out this information and they're like, oh my God, what an abuse of power. What a usurpation of my name. Get me out of here. Like, I'm not doing this anymore. And there is a big movement to become what's called a state national, which requires lots of paperwork and recording with the US federal government that you're not a citizen and sort of revoking your contract with the straw man. And that's certainly an option. That's certainly an option people are doing, and it's fueling their sovereignty journey. So what I've discovered is that it's fine to just leave the straw man where it is, that all caps name can be there and do its thing. And we as living men and women can just know that we're not that. And that's really the important part, right? Just knowing that that all caps name is a legal fiction that was created on top of you. It's like a mask. It's like a costume. And you can choose to put that costume on and be that when it serves you, and you can choose not to when it doesn't serve you. Our whole system is in such a massive transition right now. The nature of the straw man is probably changing, and the nature of our awareness is changing. All we really need to do is remember who we are as sacred, sovereign creators. Remember that we are living men and women of the living soil of the earth, and we can keep ourselves in the jurisdictions that we choose. Now, if you end up in court, it's really tricky to stay in the jurisdiction of your choosing, because their whole training and everything that they say is designed to pull you back in. Now, I'm not going to teach about that because it's not my forte, but the whole point of learning all of this is to really just embody it, right? And when we embody it and when we maintain that connection, when we maintain the authority for our own lives, and we don't slip into the trick that someone outside of ourselves should be taking care of us or should be responsible for this thing, then it's simple to stay in our chosen jurisdiction. And when we know that and when we embody it deeply, it shifts the bioenergetic field. And any of you who practice energy work and magic know that shifting the bioenergetic field can bring beautiful gifts into your sphere and really limit the external challenges that we can face, right? So I really see this time that we're living in as the eye of the needle. And when we can pull all of the elements of ourselves, all of our little threads into the midline and stay connected with our inner authority and our connection to source, we just walk right through that eye of the needle. So I really encourage you to keep studying this subject of jurisdiction and really come to understand who you are and where you are on this chart, right? What are you governed by? Do you make repair when you've caused harm? Do you make remedy when you've caused harm? Are you governed by faith? How strong is your faith? Do you resonate with the two laws of do no harm and do not trespass? Can you pull your life into alignment with those two laws? Where do you live? Do you live on the land? If you live in the realm of commerce, you may feel especially entangled in these statutes and codes. And I can tell you that a private express trust is a vehicle within which a living man or woman can stay private while allowing the trust to be a vehicle for engaging in commerce. So if you're deeply involved in commerce, it might be a more complicated disentangling, and there's totally a way. There's totally a way, and it's really not that hard. The main thing is just reorienting to the truth of who you are and where you live and what you're beholden to. So I encourage you to help yourself to the free Outer Sovereignty Starter Kit. I'll link it below the video. And that PDF has a lot more information in it than just jurisdiction. I'll be going over that information in subsequent videos, but it gets into PMAs and lawful money, which is a brilliant loophole for lawfully eliminating income tax. So we'll get into all of that. Meanwhile, help yourself. It's jam-packed with useful information that you could start using right away to increase your power, freedom, and sovereignty as living men and women of the land. Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, energy, and attention. And I will see you in the next video.